For Gather Round, the AFL converged on the city of Adelaide, where the Lions flexed their muscles and the Tigers were outplayed. The Bombers caused the boil over, while the media nursed a collective hangover. The Crows' performance was tenfold, and the Blues spent a mill at Penfolds to dissect everything from Gather Round and look towards round 6. This is Triple M Footy's Midweek Rub, the biggest newsbreaker in the business. Damien Barrett joins us.
Hey, Rabs, I love how you're using the intro to this show to further your own credentials inside the SCA family, and I like it. I think you're bringing something to this conversation.
I've been found out. The only person in here to win an Anzac Day medal, Joey Montagna.
Thank you, Rabsy. I hope we're keeping all these intros, and we are going to put it to some music at the end of the year and do a rap. I reckon it'll go well.
No worries. And Daisy's here as well.
I'll tell you what, I'm disappointed, to be honest. The Carlton Footy Club went to Penfolds and spent $1 million, but they suspended me for 2 weeks for having 5 of them at a charity function.
It was talk about
Friday before a Saturday
hypocrites.
game. Yeah, it was the Friday before a Saturday game. What are they doing over there? $1 million.
Yeah,
It's a lot of Penfolds.
Mind you, that's only small change for those guys, isn't it?
Well, they're certainly rolling, but I can't believe off the top. You won an Anzac Day medal?
Yes, I did. There you go. We St Kilda. We played 3 Anzac Day games over in New Zealand, the old New Zealand experiment, and won I think the first or second one ever over against Brisbane Lions. So Anzac Day medalist, Daisy.
With all due respect, that's a bit like a Com Games gold
compared
to an Olympic gold that happens on the MCG.
That's true.
But I didn't win one, so sour grapes.
We removed the Anzac Day component of this conversation, but the AFL's international pursuits haven't been all that successful over the journey, have they, Joey?
No, they didn't work.
No.
We tried China.
You tried 2 cities in New Zealand from memory. Wellington, I think, was one, wasn't it? And
I don't.
maybe Auckland? Or?
Yeah. You're testing my memory there.
We got sent to Dubai once on a pre-season
you
game.
did.
That was pretty good
I
fun.
was with you on that one.
Yeah,
I got that junket as well.
Well, Norwood and Mount Barker were the 49th and 50th grounds to ever host an AFL game for premiership points. So we've now reached 50, and a couple of them include, as you said, overseas. But we're not going to bang on about Gather Round Daisy because everyone's done that to death. It's been exaggerated like it was Super Bowl week. It was a tick. But it leads me to talk about the 3 weeks that we've had, a 3-week block of the Easter weekend, then Gather Round, and now we've got an absolute cracker Anzac weekend.
Awesome.
Which will you still say is your favourite? Now that we've experienced Gather Round, you've been through a lot of Anzac weekends, and then also the Easter weekend, which now with Good Friday, Damo, which one would you say is your favourite? Because it's a pretty good sort of 3 weeks of footy.
I think Anzac Day still is above and at the top of the tree for obvious reasons. Outside of the grand final and a prelim, I think this is the game that every player wants to play in. The historical nature of it as well, but also the clash. You know, you get 100,000 there. It is the biggest game outside of the ones mentioned for those reasons, and I can't wait to see what this year's edition has in hold for us.
Yeah, to me, it still stands alone, Joey, the Anzac Day period. And I had the Monday, not the Monday night game as a rule. It is this year.
Yeah.
It's Tuesday night, isn't it?
Monday night.
Yeah, so the night,
just call it Anzac Day.
Just Anzac Day, Anzac Day Eve game between Richmond and Melbourne. I feel that's become a key part of it. Now, it's still a distant second to the main event, but it has managed to weather the form of the two teams over the journey.
And the spectacle of what's done there with the pre-match on the night time versus the daytime. The daytime's done, it's the historical nature of it. But the night with the horses going around, the eternal flame and whatnot there as well, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's very creative. Really enjoy it. So it's going to be a cracking game too. Some wonderful contests that we'll get into as well. We're still none the wiser about who the best teams are.
We got
really
no idea.
In the competition.
Mixing their form, everyone.
Oh, it's hard to pick, and some teams we thought would struggle with finding ways to win, and it's been good footy.
That's a key component too. I mean, you talk about the ceremony around this round coming up, but the 4 teams playing each other into this round 6 of footy. There's no way anyone, I don't care what you say your skills are at predicting seasons, you couldn't have had these 4 teams at the top of the ladder at
You
this
love
point.
your stats, Joey. The first time since 2000 that both Collingwood and Essendon are in the top 4 when they play this match.
Yeah. I was thinking that. It actually is great for footy when Carlton, Collingwood, Essendon are all. We'd love Richmond as well, just to be playing a little bit better. But having the big,
they've had
their stint. You know what I mean? Isn't it great, though, about these big Melbourne clubs?
Good,
I looked at the
Cashies.
ladder, like even, St Kilda up there.
It's great for that.
I mean, we all bang on about, we want Gold Coast to be good and we want the Giants to be good. No, we don't. We want all the strong Melbourne teams to fill the top 8 spots because it makes it much more entertaining.
Well, it would be nice if those other clubs finally came and joined the party, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Well, we might chat about
you
that.
You can have Gold Coast at 9th forever.
No, that's right.
We'll have the Pies up the top, closely followed by an Essendon, a Richmond, and Carlton in there as well.
Now the reverence of Anzac Day, we touch on it and we then focus on it as it gets nearer. You benefit too financially, don't you, Dace?
Oh, well, look, I certainly embrace the entirety of the week, Damien, and as you would well know, there are a few functions that you get invited to come along, and and talk at and tell your side of the story, or the great clashes that were had. Zaharakis kicking a goal, Daisy Thomas taking a hanger in the first 5 minutes, all these great things. So, look, every now and then there might
and
be
the corporates like paying to hear these stories again?
Well, look, the corporates have a lot of money, as you would well know, and sometimes if they pay you on the way out, it's nice.
You and Mick should do one. You should start your own
we
little
do that. That's
together.
Friday. So if you want to come along, jump on ticket. No, it's not.
It'd be a bigger
Mick can
story
do the war references, and then you can tell the stories on game day.
Mick was actually very good at that, same as Sheed. So they were the two pioneers of it, of course. But Mick Malthouse and the actual day itself, in terms of
He was huge on that, wasn't he?
providing knowledge to kids who I had a little bit of an understanding. I had a pa who served in the war, but just to get the greater appreciation of what the day means. He and Kevin Sheedy were absolutely brilliant at doing that and paying respects to the day, but also celebrating that with what was then a great game of footy.
And speaking of that circuit, it'd be a bigger story for you when Bucks went on that circuit.
Well, I was watching a couple of highlights just over the road at Channel 7 before, and Bucks in the first ever game, with about 20 seconds to go, came through the centre and he went to a 1-on-3 with
he did.
Severo Roca.
Should have launched that shot.
Well, and that sort of might have been the precursor for the rest of his career, because I don't think he passed it inside 7. No, in terms of that moment, he didn't pass it inside 70 where I'm going. What are you blokes talking about?
I thought
What are
you were
these
saying you felt
collective
short.
groans? No, geez, calm down. Wowee.
Fair income or Fugazi, and your weekend predictions still to come. But up next, it's Damo's News, and Essendon and Collingwood will both have big names rubbed out for that Anzac Day match. This is Triple M Footy's Midweek Rub, Joey, Daisy and Damo. But right now, it's time for Damo's News, and Zach Merrett and Taylor Adams are officially out of the Anzac Day clash, Damo.
Yeah, they are the latest examples of the, I feel, rightly and right crackdown on the tackling issues that are resulting in players being slung to the ground and getting into head issues, which is a massive issue for the game. I just wanted to open this conversation up today, though, to you guys. Just the tackling techniques over the years, which have got us to this particular juncture, where the sling is part of it. And it must be said, the Match Review Office and the Tribunal, I feel, again, have been on the same page when it comes to this issue. On top of Merrett and Adams, we've had issues with Day, Rowan and Broad. And I feel all those decisions that went against the players were the right calls. Maybe Day getting 2 weeks, it could have been 1. But either way, I felt what he did was worthy of a week's sanction. But getting back to the techniques and how they've evolved, even in your times in the game, it wasn't as big a focus. It has become a massive focus to the point where players are getting damaged, to the point where they're being suspended.
Yeah, I don't know. I find it hard to still see players. The Will Day one getting 2 weeks, he was half falling to the... I don't really understand it. The Gary Rowan one I've got no issue with. Nathan Broad, absolutely no issue with. When you're electing to choose, both those players had lost possession of the ball at some stage, all were over the boundary line. When you then elect to stand up and dump them, the other ones are already on the ground. So if you're on your knees or I'm on my knees tackling you and you're standing up, there's no other option I have but to try and use your body to pull you down. I don't understand what the actual tribunal and the AFL are expecting of players in these circumstances to do as a result.
But we now know, Daisy, I feel in the back of what we've seen for these 5 decisions over the 5 rounds. I feel we do know now. You know that action is going to result in you being sanctioned.
So in a prelim final with a minute to go and there's a ball in the centre bounce and you're on your knees because of whatever circumstance and you've got a player like this, you're going to be expected to let him go?
No, as long as there's no second action where you dump, drive or sling. Your momentum can take someone down in a tackle, but it can't be that secondary bit where
Will
you
Days
actually
wasn't a secondary motion.
There was an element to it. There was a slight element to it. Now, we all think he was probably a bit harsh to get the 2, or I certainly do. But the 1 would be consistent with what we're now seeing. So I agree that they're unfortunate for these players, and it's unfortunate for everyone that's going to watch the Anzac Day game that 2 of the stars, Taylor Adams and Zach Merrett, aren't playing. But I think, as you said, for the betterment of the game and for the safety of the players, Daisy, don't forget that. That's why we're making the rule change, is for the safety of these players. Going forward, I think it's the right thing.
Yeah.
It's hopefully, unfortunately, there's a few scapegoats, but hopefully players are quick learners. And when you talk about the technique, I don't think anyone at a club has ever been taught to sling or drive or dump. I think that
so you're not taught that?
No, we're not taught
you were
that.
taught to pin an arm, though.
Yeah.
That was the old school pin.
And now you're taught to pin
tackle.
2 arms, aren't you?
Well, now it's all about not letting the ball spill free. So the idea around a tackle is completing it to stop. So if the old school where you'd go low at the hips and then players like Paddy Cripps would just put their arms up and get rid of the ball, there's no point in applying a tackle. So now you try and grab an arm And
is it also the intent, and I feel it is, but I'd rather you guys tell me if it is, the intent of the player being tackled to not dispose of ball too, which is creating this extra moment of being tackled?
I heard you say that. I think it's the opposite. I think players are now trying to bring players to ground because every player is so good at standing up in tackles and breaking tackles. So they're still able to get their arms free or shrug out of it or fend or get the boot to ball. So players are doing that secondary action because when a player stands up, so think about the Lockie Schultz. There was Darcy McPherson, the Fremantle Gold Coast game where Michael Walters got a goal. Darcy McPherson had him cold, nailed him in a tackle, but Schultz was given 3 seconds from the umpire to break out of a tackle and gave a handball, cost a goal. Now, that's why players are wanting to bring players to ground. Because if you let them stand up and the umpires give them a couple of seconds, a lot of players are good enough to make something happen out of that. So that's where I think the umpiring needs to help the players as well.
Okay.
Blow the whistle quicker so that they're not trying to force a player to ground to stop him from breaking out of that tackle.
The McPherson one you speak of, his other option there was to bump.
Yeah.
So he came flying in. He came off his man to try and impact. And the player was just about to receive the ball, so couldn't tackle him before he got it. So he had to take a couple of steps, so he did the right thing. He didn't elect to bump because that would have been the next thing of a concussion and what that. But then as a result of not then taking a sling tackle, when the player stood up in it and not then choosing to use his force, they get a goal, which arguably goes on and the margin becomes all but that. So this is a thing when, there's no real instruction as to what players are meant to do now in this situation because players are so good.
I dispute that. I dispute that. There is now. We now know what's going to result in a one-match sanction. We do now. I mean, if you do it again next week, you're going to get a week, and that has been
in terms of bringing people to the ground though.
Yes.
So whether that be force or a second action or whatever it is, but. So if you've got someone there and you've done this, what you just meant to let them go.
No, you can bring them back on yourself. But again, that's in the heat of the moment. And I get it.
And that's the thing. Like if I'm wrestling someone like a Draper who's another 10, 15 kilos on me as a smaller player, all you have to use is your own body weight to take them down.
Yeah.
I feel for the players because in terms of this, there'd be 50 times a game you do this without thinking. It's not a conscious decision to sling someone to the ground.
Well, it has to be now, doesn't it? It has to be now, yeah. Jason Horne-Francis, I want to tackle this one, not so much from him, because I think it's been played out pretty heavily over the past season, really, when it's all said and done, and particularly the past 2 or 3 weeks. But when you've got someone on your team who is under siege for whatever reason that doesn't necessarily relate to the form that he's showing, because Jason Horne-Francis has been really good, what do you do? How do you embrace it? Do you focus on it internally? Do you let the person deal with it himself? What happens?
No, they get support internally, absolutely. And you probably give them more support than you would other teammates for that reason, just to get around them, let them know that you're
Can you
on their side.
recall someone at your team?
Well, Milner used to cop a lot of booing and all that sort of stuff. You just got to stick fat internally. And, I mean, you've got to have a thick skin and you've got to be able to still be mentally resilient to play some good footy despite all the external noise. But internally, they're getting all the support they need. And what we learned, Days, you don't get to footy clubs, what is said in the footy club is all that matters. What your coach says, what your teammates think of you, and what the coaching staff think of you is really where all your attention should lie.
The beauty of what he has, of someone who is in that sort of position, is that I wasn't able to go out and play good football. So it still just continues to mount.
Are you referring to your Carlton period here?
Yeah. So the good news is for Jason Horne-Francis is his ability is now to go out and play good football, which we saw on the weekend in that last quarter. So that's one of the ways that you can actually combat it. Obviously, you rely on your internal networks, your mates in the footy club. They've also got the welfare managers there. The coach has been awesome in his defence and strong defence. I thought that was absolutely brilliant, and that's why, obviously, the Port Adelaide players love Kenny. But to go out there and then to continue to play well, hopefully there'll become a shift where the power supporters and can override the boos and the jeers that are coming.
I can see all aspects of this debate, and I don't think anyone's doing anything wrong. I mean, you see what Ken Hinckley did, as to your point, Daisy, about supporting him. You've seen what Jason Horne-Francis did. You've seen what his teammates are doing. I do factor in what Kane Corns has done. Again, he's doing his job. Now, the only
what's Kane done though? Drawing attention to the smaller things at the start of his career.
Yeah.
That another 100 players in the league would have done without zero.
So you got a problem with Kane?
I got a problem with him calling it out, specific things, and starting a public pile-on.
In what way? What's specific?
Well, the Jack Ginnivan instance. He was the one that started that. No one would have had a problem with Jack Ginnivan with a GoPro if Kane hadn't called it out.
Let's get back to Jason Horne-Francis. What have you...
I just feel that he's gone down the route of referencing him as much as he possibly can.
Yep.
And then
Is that his job, though?
Starting the external conversation on things that he's not calling out for another 100 players in the league.
Is that his job, though, Daze, to do that?
If he's going to be consistent, it's his job to do it to every player that would be coming short in the similar areas, which isn't happening at the minute because it's an easy target to go after a number one pick.
To me, he can't wash his hands of it. I don't even think he is, of being a part of this Jason Horne-Francis issue. But his job is as a commentator, and I think he's entitled to...
but you can choose which way you present the facts.
But this guy's the number one draft pick who walked out of his club.
So as a number one draft pick, for any kid coming in, you may as well go pick 7 so you can learn the ropes.
No. There's an added weight on the number one pick, particularly when he chooses to leave the footy club. But I blame North Melbourne for that more than Jason Horne-Francis, for what it's worth, on that side of it.
But that isn't being as reported as much as Jason Horne-Francis walking out.
I think it is. I think it is in other quarters.
Yeah,
but that's Kane's view too, and he's entitled to it.
He is absolutely entitled to it. But if you have that view, we should be able to call him out for having that view.
The murkiness to me, and again, I've been guilty of it, and I will be again, is the fact the kid's 19. And now,
correct.
But again, he's 19, and he's embraced all of this to this point until it's gone wrong. Now, I still think everyone's doing what they think is the right thing at the point in time. I don't think anyone's got an agenda that they're trying to overly complicate the matters with, although you're not so sure of it.
No, there's certainly been. I think everyone in the media that has spoken about Horne-Francis has to take some tiny little bit of responsibility, but certainly there have been some that have got more guilt than others, more exposure.
More guilt?
Well, more in regards to where it's led to, over the top. There has been.
You can't start a public pile-on and then once it comes,
you can't continually reference Jason Horne-Francis week after week after week and then say, but I've done nothing to create the external narrative.
I get that aspect of it, and I agree with that aspect of it, but it is his job to commentate on football, and this is the number one draft pick overall who chose to walk out of a footy club.
I think there's a lot more positive stories that could have been chosen to go on a repeated basis. I've got no issue. Yes, at some point you have to reference it because it was a big story.
Yeah.
But to go week in, week out before it was even a trade thing. And
you could argue for what he's doing, that's identifying the issue. And it's got to this point, and it's got a bit ugly. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, there's one thing identifying, there's another thing continually referencing it and drawing attention, baiting other supporters and bringing it into a sort of social media
fans
element.
boo Kane for walking out and going to choose a firefighting degree?
Or
is that a pity?
No, there's no need. But I think everyone's got some responsibility where it's got to with how much the conversation revolves around Jason Horne-Francis.
But we do talk about footy and footy issues, and number one draft picks overall are.
So you don't think we've over-indexed on the Jason Horne-Francis conversation as opposed to other players in the competition?
Joey, he's number one draft pick.
So we over-indexed on talking about Horne-Francis?
And we have in the history of the game when it comes to number one draft picks. Absolutely we have.
Yeah.
Whether you're one or two, there's a massive difference.
So we have over-indexed on Horne-Francis. That's all we're saying. There's just been a lot of commentary on one guy. That's all we're saying.
But that's going to happen this year too when Harley Reid goes number one. Whatever happens to Harley Reid for the rest of his life.
Yeah. Is he going to get the same amount of attention as Horne-Francis?
Absolutely not.
If he chooses to leave a footy club that he gets chosen by within 1 year, he will. Yeah.
So we know there's reason. There's understanding. But have we over-indexed on chatting about Jason Horne-Francis?
Well, the fact we're talking about it and have gone way too long already in our little chat here today would suggest that it is being talked about. Yeah, absolutely. Have we got time, Rabsy? Yeah. Gold Coast Suns. I'm worried about them, only because I have been since their inception of the competition. They've got a stretch of 4 games that are coming up, which will, I feel, shape Stuart Dew's time there. Now, we know he's contracted to the end of next year. Those 4 games are North Melbourne, Richmond, Melbourne and West Coast. You were supportive last year.
I was supportive as well. You and I went pretty... You were. Sorry, Daisy. You were supportive of re-signing him this time last year when they did. I could see improvement, and it's probably not the same improvement I was looking forward to be seeing at this point in the season so far. I'm not going to write them off just yet, but give me to the end of that month of football you talk about. And
it is a crucial month.
It is a crucial month, and if they're still sitting there with only a couple of wins at the end of that, with a season that looks like there's no chance of them playing finals, because the competition in a month's time will know where everyone is, everyone's sort of position is, and who are the 12 that can contend for the 8 spots and who are the extra 6 just making up the numbers. And unfortunately, if the Gold Coast fit into that spot, I worry for them and also the coach.
That's it. I'll ask you boys a question. You say, yep, that's fair income, or no, that is Fugazi. Joey, you're a big call Montana, so I'm going to start with you. Richmond's era is over.
No, that's Fugazi. Because I'm not buying into that. Haven't we learnt from Geelong that the good clubs now will find a way to stay at the top for the next 10 years? And I think that's exactly what Richmond are doing. They're setting themselves up to stay competitive and be in that window that we call it for 5 to 10 years by the way they've gone about it. I think they've got a lot of young kids on that list. They've got young key position players when you think about Gibcus and Ryan and Noah Bolts is still really young. And Taranto and Hopper are going to be very important to that as the bridge and the conduit between the aging veterans that eventually are going to retire and the next wave of young talent. So I think they're setting themselves up for a long stint at the top. Now, where that leaves them this year and potentially next year, maybe sneak into the 8. They could still play finals. I don't think they're a premiership threat because of the transition phase, but I think they're setting themselves up for a long stint being up near the top of the ladder.
I once wrote Richmond off after round 1 of 2019. That was the year and the game where Alex Rance went down.
Yeah.
And Richmond supporters rightly remind me I did say that at that time. So I'm saying this is Fugazi, Rabsy. I'm not going to make that same mistake again.
I'm just going to ask 2 questions about Gather Round before we move on. I'm going to ask you the first one, Damo. The only South Australian who had a better gather round than Jordan Dawson is Peter Malinauskas.
That is fair dinkum.
Yes.
That guy's work, Peter Malinauskas' work over that period of time was extraordinary. If you go back to grand final week last year where he pitched for it to the AFL and the clubs and got it effectively, if you go back to what happened even as the gather round unfolded where he basically gave a fresh check to the AFL where they accepted it in a time frame they would normally not consider. That's another part of it. And equally importantly, the way he conducted himself on the dozens of media outlets and interviews that he did, I've never seen a more natural person in front of a camera.
He was flawless. Yeah. He was flawless with the way he spoke. The only thing that I heard, I wasn't at this lunch, but right at the end, he was flawless. And then he thanked Gil McLaughlin and Roger Goyder.
And I was at that one, and he did
so that was the only slip up for the whole week.
Was it a Roger Goodall or was it just a play on words of
I'm not sure
Goyder? I don't know.
He's a likeable politician,
isn't he?
Which is hard to come by.
we don't know what that's like in this state.
I know you jumped in on the end of it, Daisy, but this is a collective question.
Right.
Gather Round will go down as the biggest junket in AFL history.
Yeah, and for those, that is fair income. And for those who didn't get on it this year, the lineup for next year will be out the door in terms of past players wanting to be around what was a festival of football both on and off the field.
It's hard to argue.
It is.
Sydney go down the road to Geelong this weekend, Joey. I think the Cats' record at home something like 32-5 in the last 37. Sydney will put another loss in that column this weekend.
Oh, that's Fugazi. I'm tipping Geelong. I'm not completely sold on the Cats just yet. They've had 2 easy kills, Hawthorn and West Coast, but Sydney are that banged up. Amadi and Franklin, and then all the tall defenders at the other end. Geelong really should be winning. Unfurling of the flag, they'll get the job done, I think. But it's one of those years we don't really know.
Daisy, Melbourne's loss to Essendon shows that Max Gawn is the most important player to any team in the competition.
I think that's Fugazi. I could probably name a few that we've seen already missing to other sides. Tom Lynch to a Richmond. If Jeremy Cameron went out to a Geelong, if Bontempelli went out. So that's Fugazi. However, Melbourne have mixed their form of the last month, which we jump on them pretty quickly and say they're the flag favourites and for good reason, and then they seem to let us down the week after. So, but the first question to answer that, Fugazi.
Joey?
I think Fugazi, I think it showed how important Jake Lever is as well. That back line just looked all at sea without him coming across intercepting or killing all those high balls. So I think I've been on record of saying Stephen May. I reckon we did that, Chad. I thought Stephen May was their most important player. I reckon maybe Jake Lever's next. I think they can cover Max Gawn with Brodie Grundy to some extent.
Damo, you were part of this interview. You cannot anoint yourself as the new tip rat. Tom Papley needs to make his own legacy.
Well, I think there's some plans in place behind the scenes to see how this plays out, Rabsy. Yes. But while you throw me the question as a fair dinkum or Fugazi, how's it come to me again? Is it you cannot do this?
You can't anoint yourself as the new tip
Has
rat.
he tried to anoint himself?
He joined the Saturday Rub. For a bit of context, he joined the Saturday Rub and he said to JB, call me tip rat.
He wants to be tip rat.
I love it.
I don't mind that.
No, so the way you've presented to me, I'm saying that's Fugazi because I don't want to any player to think that he or she cannot be who they want to be. And if he wants to be tip rat, let's let him be tip rat.
Yeah. How good is Paps? Honestly, he's one of the most exciting small forwards.
He's a beauty. Have you ever had someone at your club try and give themselves a nickname? Because we had Nick Dal Santo, I'm going to add him here. Yeah. He wanted to be called Pup for a while after Pup Clark. When Pup Clark was going through that stage, Dal went and got some earrings and had the bleach. He wanted to be known as like Pup, and he tried to get the boys to call him Pup, and everyone went, no, you can't give yourself a nickname.
Did he have a blue in Noosa after hours?
With Carlos. No one's ever tried a nickname.
I haven't heard that one.
There would have been some, but I can't think of it off the top of my head. I tried to nickname someone NASA because they're only good in in space, but that didn't quite go down. So weren't overly brave under a high ball.
I'm going to play you some audio, Daisy Thomas. I want you to have a listen to this.
You know, I'm nervous because my wife and 6 kids can't get into the bloody stadium. I've been on the phone for half an hour.
Get the bloke on the phone.
Hello.
Get him on, and who does he work for?
He'll be sacked next week.
What the hell?
Okay, that guy on the gate, no chance of keeping his job.
So Mark Rasciuto, whose name is on one of the grandstands at the Adelaide Oval, couldn't get 6 of his family into the game on Thursday night. Fair dinkum or fugazi. If you went on to seek.com.au on Friday, there would be an advertisement for a security guard at Adelaide Oval.
No, that's fair dinkum. The Roos got some serious pull in that fair city of Adelaide, and unfortunately, in Triple M fashion, we didn't really let it go unnoticed for the best part of 2 hours of the call. So, unfortunately, there will be a position vacant at the Adelaide Oval.
And big call, Montagna. Both Adelaide teams will play finals this season.
Oh.
Or if it's one, who?
I'll go fair dinkum because both are very, very good chance to play. That bottom half of that 8 is wide open. So I think Adelaide and Port Adelaide could both play finals, yes.
Adelaide are playing unbelievable.
As good as anyone at the moment.
Yeah, spectacular. And if they continue it in terms of not just winning, but the style, they'll lose some games along the way. But I could see them playing finals, no doubt.
Well, we've mentioned it already a few times in this podcast. A massive weekend of footy, Anzac Day round, some big games. Carlton versus St Kilda, Essendon versus Collingwood. Will get all your predictions and tips up next on the Midweek Rub with Joey, Damo and Daisy. Before we get into the round 6 games, let's hear your predictions from round 5.
I think Freo or Morals in this one. Freo season on the line, they will definitely beat the Gold Coast.
Morals.
Yeah.
Collingwood are my certainties for the week.
Hey!
They make a statement here against the Saints.
And I'm going to follow you in there with my certainties to reality check for St Kilda.
Yeah. I think for the first time this year, you're all bang on the money.
Yeah.
Just.
We weren't all
Just.
convincing on all of them.
On all of them, yeah.
We're starting to get a gauge now on where the season lies. A little bit better.
I'm not. I'm seeing them horribly. Seeing them absolutely horribly.
Round 6 kicks off on Friday night over in Perth with a huge game. Very important for both these teams. Fremantle versus the Bulldogs, Joey.
Massive game. Loser is still in strife. They'll be 2-4, I think. And you could almost start to say it's going to be tough to make finals from there. So big game. I'll go with Fremantle at home. I think they're starting to find their form. They just got to play like they're 4 goals down from the start of the game and not wait till they actually are 4 goals down. And I think they'll be okay.
It is a worry when you get to this point, and their wins, the Dockers, are against West Coast, which was banged up in the game in question, and Gold Coast, which regularly loses matches it could and should win. So, but when you get to this stage and both teams are 2 and 3, and you had one team in the 8 at the start of the year and one that not, I'm going to stick with that plan. So Fremantle.
I'm going to tip the Dogs, and I had Fremantle in my 8, not the Dogs, but I just think at the minute they're playing the better footy. As you referenced, Freo beat nothing so far. The Dogs aren't going great, but I think they'll win.
We are short for time, so we're going to gloss over a couple of games. Carlton versus St Kilda. This is massive. I think general admission tickets have sold out, so I think there's going to be over 50,000 at Marvel when this game takes place on Sunday, Joey.
Sunday Rub, we'll be doing that one,
Yes,
Daisy. Can't wait. It's a cracking game. Hard to pick. Form-wise, you've got to go with St Kilda. So even though they didn't beat Collingwood, they showed they're going to be awfully hard to beat. Carlton have some concerns, particularly in the midfield. They're struggling in the midfield. So unless they rediscover that, you have to go with St Kilda.
I'm giving them one more chance, which just seems strange given they've only lost one game. But I'm giving
The Blues.
Carlton one more chance on this particular weekend in terms of me thinking loftily for them. So I'm picking them to beat St Kilda.
I'm very much the same. I think the Adelaide game showed them exactly where they had their shortcomings in the games that they were winning on the back of their first month of footy. So I think they will win this one in a close one.
This would never be heard. Caminiti a big out for St Kilda.
That's a good point.
Wilkie and Patton on Carlton's big forwards is going to be a huge matchup. It's going to be crazy. Gold Coast versus North Melbourne, Daisy. Why do you want me to bring this game up?
Well, and I said I was seeing them horribly, but I reckon this is one where I just get my eye back in, maybe nudge them around for the first 30 and then get to 100 in quick succession. North Melbourne in an upset.
Ooh. Is this Oracle sort of stuff?
Well, if it gets up, I'll go with it. As I said,
Stewie Jew's season on the line here. Gold Coast have to win. They'll get it done.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joey, on that aspect of it. So Suns for me.
Melbourne, Richmond under lights on Monday night ahead of Anzac Day the next day. This is going to be a magnificent spectacle and also a pretty big game, I think, as well.
Keeping the faith in Melbourne, I think they'll bounce back. If Gawn and Lever are back into the side, Melbourne get the job done, and I think they'll get it done pretty well.
certainties for me. That's where I'm putting my
Yeah, me
cert
too.
this
My
week.
certainty. I'm with Daisy.
So you're both certainties?
Yep.
All right, this could be was it midweek rub first? Melbourne certainties as well.
Yes, I like it.
Roll in.
Smile in.
Roll in,
Yeah.
boys.
And what probably shapes up to be one of the biggest Anzac days in history, Collingwood versus Essendon, both teams in the top 4 since 2000.
Yes, massive. The Pies, obviously some injury concerns now, especially in the tall man department, and Essendon's big fella in Draper is absolutely on fire. So I'm going to purely tip Collingwood because that's where my heart lies. They're hard to knock, and Craig McRae does a good job, but I hope this game lives up to all the expectation.
Pies for me, Joey.
Yeah, Pies rely on system rather than personnel. I think the Pies just,
Righto, we can all go and get some sleep after gather round and look forward to Friday night. Thank you very much, Damo. Catch every game across round 6 on Triple M, starting with Damo and the Friday huddle ahead of a massive game at Optus Stadium between Freo and the Dogs. This has been Triple M Footy's Midweek Rub. Joey, Daisy and Damo.